Hi everybody, John Pomeroy here. I want to show you some of my favorite scenes in my career and kind of break down what was working, what was not working, and share with you some of the stories and tricks of the trade.
And they called him Littlefoot.
And the most feared of all these pirates was the notorious Captain Nathaniel Flint.
So this scene is from Winnie the Pooh and Tigger 2, which was my first professional animation at Disney Studios back in 1973. So on this movie, Winnie the Pooh and Tigger 2, this was my first animation as a professional animator with Disney Studios. I was a fledgling animator. I had been in the animation trainee program for no more than 3 or 4 months, and they saw potential and they just gave me a tryout. I was working under the supervision of veteran animator Frank Thomas. He was my mentor during this sequence. And this was my first animation out, and I was brand new, but I was ready to learn, ready to listen. I was being like a sponge. And so I got a chance to animate this whole section. It was about 119 feet, which was a nice section for an animator to get started on. And I animated all the characters. So Winnie the Pooh, Tigger, Rabbit, Christopher Robin, Kanga and Roo, all of those characters, I actually got a chance to animate on this.
I'm so happy I feel like bouncing.
You promised! You promised!
Oh, I did, didn't I? You mean I can't ever bounce again?
Never!
Never?
Now, this scene was important, especially to my supervisor, Frank Thomas. He was teaching me about the willing suspension of disbelief in this scene. And it was kind of my little baptism of fire because he had me doing this scene at least 16 different times. The first time, it was worked out nicely. The action was okay, but the stripes weren't working. The tail wasn't working. Something about the head wasn't quite right. What he was trying to teach me is that if the audience believes that this character is real, they'll get sucked into the moment. That is what he was calling the willing suspension of disbelief. And it really is important that me as an animator is trying to achieve that through the discipline of drawing, trying to keep my guard up. The way he walks sadly in that snow, and this scene was repeated 2 or 3 times during this sequence, it had to be just right. And what I'm trying to do is connect with the viewing audience, that they begin to feel sad for that character, Tigger.
Christopher Robin, I like the old bouncy Tigger best.
Now this was important too because all of the other animals, they were feeling the pathos and so sad. They are now turning and putting the pressure on Rabbit to change his heart in regards to Tigger. And he relents.
Oh, you mean I can have my bounce back?
This sequence I was on for about 6 months, and it really, really drove home the importance of animation acting. I was blessed to have a mentor with Frank Thomas. That relationship was extremely important. And it taught me the discipline of always trying to search for the very best way to depict an important story point. And it infuses itself in the acting, in the drawing, and the facial expression. And in this case, this character is walking away in the snow. It's slightly falling. All of this was extremely important in the story to get the audience feeling that sorrow and pathos for Tigger. So this next clip is from The Secret of NIMH, 1982. This was our first film that Don Bluth, Gary Goldman, and myself produced right after we left Disney Studios. So on this section of Secret of NIMH, I was the directing animator in charge of the Great Owl. I animated all the scenes concerning him. I did a few scenes with Mrs. Brisby, but my focus was on directing the animation and executing the animation on the Great Owl.
Come inside or go away.
So here, Mrs. Brisby is going into the great owl's lair, and she's seeking advice on what she can do to help her sick son. And she's venturing deeper into this cavernous, hollowed-out tree where the owl lives. We're trying to build up the suspense of what she's getting ready to encounter. We see bones of animals that have been eaten. We see a moth that flies by her and scares her. And she continues on. Now, this is an interesting part because I wanted to increase the danger aspect of her venture into this lair. And it was really important that we showcase, the life and death potential in what she was trying to do. Scary sequence. And what I was proposing to Don and Gary is that we have a giant spider descend from overhead down to the path she was walking on and begin to follow her. I wanted to increase the danger. And I also wanted to lead up to a great entry for the great owl. And this was an idea that Don wasn't too keen about. He thought it would be over the top for our children's audience. But I think kids want to be scared and they want to be saved. They want to feel the thrill of the ride and they want to be on the other side of a climax or a terrifying moment where they come out okay at the end. So that's what this does. The spider is descending from the foreground down behind her. Continues following her. She's unaware. Come into a close-up. This thing is about ready to get her, and all of a sudden, so this next clip I'm going to show you is a scene from An American Tail, released in 1986. This was our first collaboration with Steven Spielberg. On American Tail, I was wearing two hats. I was producer as well as supervising animator. And in this particular sequence, I got to animate both Gussie Mouseheimer and Honest John.
There's a dead mouse on that table.
Now, this is the introduction. I have got to mention this. Madeline Kahn, who was the voice of Gussie Mouseheimer, was a terrific inspiration for this character. We actually, when we first recorded her, we wanted her to kind of recapture the type of voice that she did for Blazing Saddles. And she did a marvelous job. She helped us create a character that was really, really memorable.
It's an Irish custom, Gussie. The cat's got him today.
Precisely why I am here to see you.
Would you care for a wee drop of the creature?
Today was the worst ever. Those cats are killing
Now, the little
everyone.
gesture that she does,
They don't even
she
know the
picks off a
difference
piece of
between
lint
witch and
off
POOH.
of Honest John's shoulder and flicks it. This is what we refer to in the animation industry as bits of business. The things that endure these characters to the viewing audience. That they seem alive because of all these little idiosyncrasies. Picking that off of it was a throwaway movement. And I enjoyed doing that. It was a great character to work with. But when you have a great voice talent like a Gussie Mouseheimer, Madeline Kahn, it really inspires you to push the envelope in your acting. Now, this next clip is from Land Before Time, released in 1988, and this was our second collaboration with Steven Spielberg, and this time with George Lucas. So on Land Before Time, I was serving once again as producer and supervising animator, and sometimes storyboard artist. I was really, really involved with, in this particular sequence where Littlefoot is born, focusing basically on him. I did the scenes where his parents are coming down in perspective, where the head gets larger and they're viewing their newborn Littlefoot. So I was animating all the characters in this sequence. And this scene brings back a lot of tender memories because I was not a father, and I was projecting in my mind as I was animating this scene what it was going to be like when I have my first child. So that imagining that moment just fed itself perfectly into this scene. And trying to understand, dinosaurs born out of eggshells. How does that all transpire? What is the action like on that? I think I was looking at footage that we got of birds being born, cracking out of an egg. I think I even had some lizard footage of lizards breaking out an egg. But this had to be a very tender, soft moment.
Here I am.
He can't quite get his focus either. Being newborn, he is trying to look around and see who he is, next to, his parents and grandparents, and he's trying to focus. His gaze is wandering around. For an animator, when they create a moment like this, the reward comes later when people come up to you and says, "Oh, that scene when Littlefoot is born, that went right to my heart." And, animators live for those moments. And also another thing too is we work in a format that you get alone with your scene and you're working long hours just alone, and then you sit in a movie theater with the dark, in the dark with all of the other people watching your scene that comes up, and you can hear the audible cry or the audible laugh, and there's no greater reward. Now, this next clip is from Pocahontas, released in 1995. So in Pocahontas, I was lead animator on the character of Captain John Smith. I had a crew of about 16 other animators who I helped supervise. And so I was concentrating basically on that character. Pocahontas was being animated by lead animator Glenn Keane, and we collaborated together on this sequence. Now what's happening here is we're setting the tempo. It becomes very quiet. We're right on the heels of a big musical number, and we get very quiet because this is going to be the first meeting of Captain John Smith meeting Pocahontas. It's interesting because this was right after I came back to Disney Studios in 1992, and this was the assignment that they were promising me. It was great. I loved working on this character. The Disney executives wanted a depiction of human characters as true to form as possible. So we were very limited in how slapsticky or cartoony or how comedic we could get with these characters. They have to be really well rendered and well executed. So we shot lots of live action reference for this entire movie as a reference. And when I say reference, I don't mean that we're tracing each of the frames. I mean that we're looking at the basic locomotion of the character, and we use that as a guide to exaggerate for the integrity of the film. All this movement here, we got live action reference. We had an actor and actress going through these actions that helped the animators make them believable. So she appears out from the bushes, sees no one there, thinking that he's gone. So the coast is clear, she crawls out. Now, what's interesting about this scene, being a history buff, I want to make sure that how I was depicting him loading his musket was authentic, which is interesting. That was true to the period. Blows on the wick, takes aim, jumps out, and sees Pocahontas. Now this is where an artist's drawing ability really comes into play, because both Glenn Keane and myself, this was our sequence, and we had to make sure that this drawing was on point. You don't want a person's face moving at a different speed than his nose, mouth, or eyes. Everything had to be anchored perfectly. We had live action reference, but that still didn't get you out of running into trouble spots. So with these close-ups, boy, we worked very hard on making sure those expressions were correct and the facial structure was on point. And to make sure that the character was not only drawn well, but had the correct weight and the locomotion of him standing up and then him placing his musket down as he steps forward towards her. And, you know, this scene spent a lot of time on his facial expression, on what his lips are doing, and you know, in opening up and closing, his eyes, the stare, how big those pupils get when he's, you know, taken aback by her beauty. With this type of sequence, you want to build the audience expectation about if they were to meet, if they were to get together. You're asking these questions about a potential romance here between these two characters. Ordinarily, you think they'd be fighting it out. All of a sudden, they're struck by each other's appearance. So it was a great sequence to work on. Now, this next clip is from Atlantis: The Lost Empire, one of my favorite films that we did in 2001. I was lead animator in charge of the character of Milo Thatch, and I had a great advantage with a terrific vocal performance given by Michael J. Fox. And it's interesting because with Michael J. Fox, when we were recording him, meeting with him and talking with him, I was carefully studying all of his facial expressions, and I was trying to get some of those incorporated into this performance. How we get into the sequence is really important. This is coming right off the death of the king. He turns to one of the members of the crew that he's built up a relationship with, Doc Sweet. An interesting challenge and a lesson that I've learned in the past that I applied to this was I showed a pose test to the directors, Gary Trousdale and Kirk Wise, of this whole scene, and they approved it. They thought it worked great. Something was gnawing at me inside. I just felt it could have been better. And I went back, even though it had been improved, I went back and reanimated it. I just had a feeling I could have made it better. Also, what I did was I shot my own live action of myself to playback of this great voice interpretation that Michael J. Fox did. He did a great performance for this character. And of course, that's one of the great things that Animator looks forward to, you know, working with such an amazing talent. And so I shot my own live action, went back to my desk, reanimated this scene, showed it to the directors in a very rough state, and they loved it. So sometimes you'll have to take the risk of following your own instincts, and you may be correct in going that extra mile and making your scene that much better.
I lead a band of plundering vandals to the greatest archaeological find in recorded history, thus enabling the kidnap and/or murder of the royal family. Not to mention personally delivering the most powerful force known to man into the hands of a mercenary nutcase who's probably gonna sell it to the Kaiser. Have I left anything out?
And all of the information that I got from my own movements really informed this performance. And I was able to pick and choose those particular poses that needed real a demonstrative, broad form, and those that needed to be quiet, and how to build what we call texture into the performance. So there's slow moments against very big, explosive moments. That was the important feature in animating this scene. Now, this next clip is from the Disney feature Treasure Planet, released in 2002. So in Treasure Planet, I was lead animator in charge of Captain Flint and his crew. And I also animated quite a few scenes with Jim Hawkins. But in this instance, it was just a gift to someone who's a historical painter as well as animator. Getting to animate all of these characters in this battle scene was truly, truly a treat for me.
On the clearest of nights,
and this features the first appearance of the legendary pirate Captain Nathaniel Flint and his pirate crew. And we're building up, you know, the theme of this particular story, opening with, you know, how peaceful and calm the atmosphere is in this beautiful treasure galleon that's taking off out into space.
Pirates. And the most feared of all these pirates was the notorious Captain Nathaniel Flint.
So what we're doing is we're posturing this opening as if it were a story being told to by a very, very young Jim Hawkins. One of the things that's interesting is that I had just had a big art exhibition at Disney Feature Animation, and it featured, about half a dozen battle paintings that I did, over the course of 2 or 3 years. Large paintings, one of them was about 8 feet by 11 feet, of battle scenes. And the two directors from Treasure Planet, John Musker and Ron Clements, went to this show, and they thought, there's the guy that we've got to get to do this opening sequence. And they approached me right after that. I was out promoting Atlantis, the Lost Empire, and I had a meeting just before we left on the promo tour. They invited me, and they say, we want to open up with a battle sequence. Would you be interested? And I said, absolutely. So it was an interesting and challenging task, because I had to invent and design crew members and a Captain Nathaniel Flint. And his features were interesting. I actually, he's got 3 rows of eyes, and while animating this, I would actually get headaches drawing him because of the optical illusion with the 3 rows of lights. But I was able to train myself optically to get through that challenge. But I really enjoyed this sequence. To be able to have for about maybe less than a minute, maybe 30 seconds, 40 seconds worth of animation, where you're just launching the energy of this picture onto the screen, and people, going to the screening of this, people would always sit back, as these pirates. And they were a combination of humanoid, mutants, cyborgs, insects, all manner of forms of different mutant extraterrestrial pirates. And it was really fun. One of my favorite animation challenges and films to work on in my career. So this next clip is from Space Jam 2: A New Legacy, released in 2021. So on Space Jam 2: A New Legacy, I was in charge of animating Lola Bunny and the Bugs Bunny character in this particular sequence. I worked on many other characters in some of the other sequences in and around it. Very challenging that you take a superhero like a Bugs Bunny and you're creating a death scene with that character. They had just come off with a triumph, a victory over the bad guys in this movie. They're celebrating, and they realize that the person who allowed them to have victory is now suffering and is going to be passing away. Everyone's concerned.
We're all back together again.
Bugs?
Lola Bunny here realizing what's happening with Bugs. And, it's like heartbreak. How do you depict that in drawing form? And how do you do that where you're taking broad animation characters and you're reducing the tempo of the sequence way down to a very, very slow texture? And it gets into the drawing, the acting, the posture. I mean, I had my mirror by my desk at all times. You've seen the pictures of classic, movies where Disney animators have got their mirror by their desk and they're mugging, the expression that they want to express on their drawing. I was doing the same thing. But I wanted to make sure that I structured it in such a way where the audience wasn't snickering, but they were getting a tear in their eye. You had to make it as sincere as possible.
That's all, folks.
Poor Bugs goes up to cartoon heaven. When you're building a sequence like this, like all animators, you want to put in as much great posing and great drawing as possible, but you end up taking out more than you end up putting in. And I think the value of this sequence for me was that lessons of restraint. How much can I tell in lesser drawings? How much can I convey to the audience in fewer poses? And making deliberate decisions on how and what parts of the face move, how the head tilts, the shoulders, and all this body posture, reducing it down just to the bare minimum to put over the acting, to put over the story point so that the audience believes it and is with you emotionally. Wow, that was a lot to cover. I could do this all day. I mean, there's so much material to cover. If there are things that I did not cover, please subscribe to our channel and let us know of what we can show you that we didn't cover this time. Hopefully, I'll see you again. Take care. Bye-bye.